Hello everybody, 'tis I, the rumpled one. The Drunkards Walk, How Randomness Rules Our Lives by Leonard, Mlodinow. Good book. Fellow traders, I suggest you read this book. I'll read a few quotes so you can get an idea. Page 5. The game is called probability guessing. In lieu of toying with shrimp and histamine, subjects are shown a series of cards or lights, which can have two colors, say green or red. Things are arranged so the colors will appear with different probabilities, but otherwise without a pattern. For example, red might appear twice as often as green in a sequence like red, red, green, red, green, red, red, green, green, red, 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 and so on. The task of the subject, after watching for a while, is to predict whether each new member of the sequence will be red or green. This is a variation of the red rat, green rat. And once again, the rats won the game. And the point is that he continues over on page 6. Making wise assessments and choices in the face of uncertainty is a rare skill. And so he says that humans usually try to guess the pattern, and in the process we allow ourselves to be outperformed by a rat. So in other words, people try to see patterns when sometimes there's no pattern to see, really. And that's what happens a lot in trading, fellow traders. Page 11. A lot of what happens to us, success in our careers, in our investments, or in our life decisions, both major or minor, is as much the result of random factors as the result of skill, preparedness, and hard work. So the reality that we perceive is not a direct reflection of the people or circumstances that underlie it, but is instead an image blurred by the randomizing effects of unforeseeable or fluctuating external forces. This is not to say that ability doesn't matter. It is one of the factors that increases the chances of success. But the connection between actions and result is not as direct as we might like to believe. Thus, our past is not so easy to understand, nor is our future so easy to predict. And in both enterprises, we benefit from looking beyond superficial explanations. So, I mean, if I look back on my life, there's no way I could have predicted the path that I took, because I had certain ideas and there were certain things that happened that were outside my control. I mean, when you think about it, look at the job if you're working. Look at the job you have. Is that really the job you wanted, you wanted to grow up to have? Or were there some external circumstances, random meetings that got you a job? In fact, a buddy of mine, he had a, 40-year, 20, 30, 40-year career in the Navy. I guess it's probably somewhere in the 30s. Eddie, you have to let me know how long you worked for the Navy. But anyway, he met this guy, I think he sat next to him at a card table in Vegas. And they got to chatting. He wound up getting a job, which then, he wound up getting two of my other school buddies, or our school buddies' jobs. One random event. They couldn't have predicted that at all. Let's skip almost to the end of the book now. On page 189. The human brain has evolved to be very efficient at pattern recognition. But as the confirmation bias shows, we are focused on finding and confirming patterns rather than minimizing our false conclusions. Yet we needn't be pessimists, for it is possible to overcome our prejudices. It is a start simply to realize that that chance events too produce patterns. It is another great step to learn that if we question, I'm sorry, let me start that sentence over. It is another great step if we learn to question our perceptions and our theories. Finally, we should learn to spend as much time looking for evidence that we are wrong as we spend searching for reasons we are correct. I mean, the police would do well to heed that knowledge, that lesson. You know, once they think somebody is guilty, that's all they do is look for evidence to prove that he's guilty or she's guilty, rather than looking for evidence to find out who the real criminal is. I mean, it would be really interesting if somebody would collect data and produce a statistic showing how often police go after the wrong guy. Not just the ones that are convicted, but just in their case of investigation. That maybe their first suspect that they investigate, that they really try to prove wrong, you know, maybe 4 or 5 days into it or weeks into it, they get some evidence that clears them. All that time was basically wasted because they were so hell-bent on proving that they were guilty rather than finding out, are they guilty or are they innocent? You know, it'd be real simple if you think about it. If they have a suspect, if they took time to find one clue, one piece of evidence that cleared them, maybe they can get rid of the false suspects a lot quicker. It's just something to think about. And even before there was a quote, when we are in the grasp of an illusion, or for that matter, whenever we have a new idea, instead of searching for ways to prove our ideas wrong, we usually attempt to prove them correct. Psychologists call this the confirmation bias, and it presents a major impediment to our ability to break free from the misrepresentation of randomness. So just remember that, fellow traders. Confirmation bias and all those patterns you see on the charts. And one last quote. It is easy to concoct stories explaining the past or to become confident about dubious scenarios for the future. That there are traps in such endeavors doesn't mean we shouldn't undertake them, but we can work to minimize, or we can work to immunize ourselves against errors of intuition. We can learn to view both explanations and prophecies with skepticism. We can focus on the ability to react to events rather than relying on the ability to predict them, on qualities like flexibility, confidence, courage, and perseverance. And we can place more importance on our direct impressions on people than on their well-trumpeted past accomplishments. In these ways, we can resist forming judgments in our automatic, deterministic framework. Because he goes on to say sometimes that when you're hiring two people, past performance, doesn't mean, just like in mutual funds, doesn't necessarily indicate the future is going to be the same. He showed that sometimes a CEO gets fired because they had a couple of bad quarters in a row, but they had put things together to turn the company around, and then a couple years later, or couple quarters later, the new CEO's taking credit for work that they're not really responsible for. It was the previous CEO that did it. And sometimes, even blaming the CEO, you're chopping off the head, but that's not really the person or persons responsible for the performance. They're just basically, or hopefully, steering the ship. So anyway, The Drunkard's Walk, How Randomness Rules Our Lives by Leonard Mlodinow. I recommend you read this book, especially if you're one of my fellow traders out there.